Hey everyone, welcome into this week's game preview. Anjelica, Trinone, and Ryan Decker here. West Virginia with another tough contest this weekend, welcoming in number 14 Iowa State to Milan Puskar Stadium for a 3:30 kick. But before we get into the Cyclones, let's take a quick look back at last week's loss, 50-39 to number 11 Oklahoma State. So there in the third quarter, a bright spot for the WVU defense, able to block a punt and then also a pick six, get within 6 points of the Cowboys, but ultimately 5 WVU turnovers led to 27 OSU points. So not a great day offensively for West Virginia, and just not a great all-around day there for the program, as we heard after Tony Gibson, Jake Spavital, Dana Holgorsen, all very disappointed with the way that the Mountaineers really just didn't, rise to the occasion there against another ranked opponent. So what were your biggest takeaways from last week?
Thank goodness that David Long was out there. I mean, 18 tackles, 7 tackles for loss. David Long was great on Saturday. Al-Rashid Benton looked good. The defense as a whole, I don't think played all that bad. You think you hold Mason Rudolph, who's one of the best passers, not only in the Big 12, but in the country as well, to just 216 passing yards. I mean, that's a pretty good display of defense right there. Special teams, I thought, played very well as well.
Yeah, now it's definitely going to be another big test for that WVU defense this weekend and for the team all around. As like I said, they're bringing in another ranked opponent, number 14, Iowa State, and this isn't the same Iowa State Cyclones team from years past. I mean, they're on such a hot streak right now, able to knock off Oklahoma when the Sooners were ranked number 3, and then last week kind of shocking everybody there, beating TCU. They were ranked 4th at the time, undefeated. So, I mean, what's really been working for these Cyclones? What is it about this year's team that they're able to play at such a high level?
I think it's the defense. That's where it all starts for Iowa State. They've been really good here, especially the last couple weeks. You look at the last 14 quarters for Iowa State, just 27 total points this defense has given up, and 7 really isn't even on the defense. It's on special teams with a kick return for a touchdown. That's how TCU scored their only points of the game. So defense and special teams is really where they've been doing it. And, I mean, you look, everyone they've played in the Big 12 so far, Iowa State has, they're holding them to at least 10 points under the season average. That's very stingy defense.
Defensively there, too, ISU first in the Big 12 in turnover margin, tackles for loss, second in scoring defense and total defense. So this is going to be a huge test for this WVU offense, especially after what it did last week, not just having an uncharacteristic day all around.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and especially when West Virginia at times this year has been a second-half team. You look at Iowa State defensively, only 24 points all year given up in the second half. That's incredible what they've been able to do after going back in the locker room at halftime. So it's going to be tough this week for WVU for sure.
You look offensively, led by quarterback Kyle Kemp. This guy, he was, 4th on their depth chart coming in. He was a walk-on, and now he is 4-0 leading the Cyclones. And he was a part of both of those huge upsets. And, I mean, he's got, a running back in Montgomery, and their receivers, I think, 6'6", 6'5", 6'4". So, like I said, this is going to be another tough test for the WVU defense. So we'll see how they match up, but definitely going to create some matchup issues.
Yeah, definitely, because since Kyle Kemp has taken over, Iowa State really seems to have gotten very balanced offensively. They're about 50-50 between run and pass. Obviously, David Montgomery is one of the better running backs in the Big 12 with just about a little over 700 yards this year. But Kemp, I mean, he just doesn't take a whole lot of chances. Only 2 interceptions so far since he's come into the game for the Iowa State Cyclones, and then he's completing about 67% of his passes. So he just doesn't take a whole lot of chances, which kind of helps Iowa State just keep the ball and keep gaining yards at their pace.
Yeah, and speaking of that, just getting the ball, gaining yards, West Virginia is going to have to get back to the ground game this week, but they weren't able to do that last week against Oklahoma State, and this defense is arguably even more tough than that one that they faced. And when you look defensively, of course, we've got to talk about linebacker Joel Lanning, the quarterback, former quarterback, moved to linebacker. But, I mean, he's played on offense this year. He's played on defense. He's played on special teams. And, I mean, on any side of the ball, this is a guy that he can just wreak total havoc.
He can. Joel Lanning leads Iowa State in tackles. He's one of the leaders in tackles for loss. He's also done a little bit of everything with getting pass deflections, quarterback hits. He's in the backfield a lot. And then, you talk about his offensive output. He can play quarterback at times. He can run the ball every once in a while. So he's a dual threat guy. And I think it was Dana Holgorsen that kind of compared him to David Sills a little bit. To where, obviously we know David with his quarterback background can kind of dissect defenses a little bit better than maybe other wide receivers can. Well, Joel Lanning can do the same thing, dissecting opposing offenses a little bit better than the average defensive player can because of his background.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about comparisons there, defensive coordinator Tony Gibson said right now this Iowa State team is playing with the toughness that West Virginia played with last year and in years past. And if you've read or heard anything about WVU football this week, you know that toughness is the main area of emphasis heading into this one. That's all we've heard about all week. Coaches just not impressed, but the players and coaches all had said, you know, our physicality is something that we really are working on this week. And I mean, this West Virginia team is really going to have to bring the toughness this weekend.
Yeah, they are, and it starts up front. I think that's where Coach Holgerson and some of the other coaches they've started, but obviously it's on everyone to be physical, but it starts up front with the offensive and defensive linemen. You've got to get in the backfield on defense. You've got to keep opposing defensive linemen out of the backfield if you're on offense, and keep Will Greer clean. He hasn't been as clean as far as pocket goes the last couple weeks, so you've got to keep him upright and give those running backs some lanes because the running game has been struggling here as of late, as we mentioned.
Yeah, and we'll see if West Virginia can rise to the occasion. Not so well against ranked opponents this year, only one win over a top 25 opponent, and that was against Texas Tech, that big comeback victory that they had there. So we will see if there's some Mountaineer magic this weekend, able to pull up the upset over number 14 Iowa State. We've got plenty more on that matchup coming up this weekend on a brand new episode of the Dana Holgerson Show. And of course, our coverage for the game on Mountaineer Game Day starts bright and early on Saturday at 10 a.m. And like we said earlier, it's a 3:30 kick for West Virginia and Iowa State at Milan Puskar Stadium. So for Ryan Decker, I'm Anjelica Trinone. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you again right here next week.